So hello everyone, today I'm gonna show you how you can create this type of cool looking hair simulation in Blender. So in this tutorial I'm using the Blender particle system, you can see. So I'm not using geometry because geometry nodes are not that much good for simulation of hair like that. So I didn't use that thing. So I'm using the older Blender hair simulation system. So I'm not gonna tell you everything like the bottom, like how to separate the mesh, how to create the hair particles, everything. I'm gonna just show you the setting what I'm using in this one. So if you can see there, you can see if I drag this thing it will be so much lag here because it is quite a lot of hair particles. So you can see there the hairs are looking kind of cool and it was simulating properly. So the first thing that you need to do is, if you want to create any kind of hair, then of course you need to add the particle system in your things. I'm not going to tell about the mesh stuff, that you need to separate the mesh like this one, how I separated this thing. So you need to first create the mesh of your head, and then you need to separate this thing mesh, and then you have to add the hair, because if you try to do the hair on the main model 3D model, then it will create some problem. So that's the first thing. And then what you have to do, you have to just add the particle system like this, and you can see that I baked this thing, that's why it was not showing the settings, but you can do, I'm showing just like this. So you have to first select the number of particle 500, then hair length is depends to you how much you want your hair longer, it will totally depend on you. And then for the segment portion, what you need to do, you can increase this segment to 20. Okay, I'm using 5 because I am increase it in this area, B-spline area. But if you want more bending in your hairs, like more bendings, proper bendings, you can increase this thing there also, or you can do in this area also. Okay, you can increase the B-spline and increase the count. So I'm using 5. Then what you need to do, you have to enable this hair dynamics, and you have to, there is a quality step, do not make it 50 if you didn't have the high-end PC. No, it was not 50. Oh yes, it's 50. So do not use 50. I will recommend you to use like 20, 30 maximum. If you need very good kind of simulation like realistic type, then you have to bump this thing up like 50 to 70. You can probably go full like 100, but it will make your system very laggy and you couldn't able to do the things. So I will recommend you to just drag this thing a little bit down like 50, 40, 30 like that. Then you have the collision. So the collision is I'm using 20. You can use this also, or you can use 10 to 5. So collision will help the hair to collide with the object properly, and if you're using the low collision, then it will not properly collide with the surface of the model and I will recommend you to use 10 or 5, something like that. So this thing is done. Then there is an option called distance. Okay, so distance is the main thing. Default it was, I think, 0.15, something like that. So do not make this 0.15. okay, so you have to check, start with 0.001. then if you see that if your hair is colliding with your, like intersecting with your mesh, like if I go to this area, I'm not seeing that much intersection, but you will see some kind of, like there is one here that is like intersecting with the mesh. So what you need to do, you have to bump up this thing from 0.001, just slightly increase like 0.001. you try, if it doesn't work, like if it is intersecting with your mesh, then you increase it to like 0.002, 0.003, like that. Okay, do not go too much because it will create too much gap between your mesh and your hair, then it will not look realistic and not look good. So I will recommend you to just try whatever it suit for your simulation or your animation, like that. Okay, and this setting, impulse clumping, leave it like that. Structure, yes, structure is the main thing. Okay, vertex mass, make this thing 0.01 kg, it will be default like 0.3 or something like that. Make this 0.1. the lesser you decrease this thing, this the easier of for your hair to move. Like it is weight of the hair, it is basically the weight of the hair, how much the weight of your hair is defined by this value. Okay, so try to decrease this thing, do not make it 0, try to make it 0.001, something like that. Try it. Okay, try. And then there is an option called stiffness. Okay, so default will be 0.50, something like that. I'm using 0.10. So for me 0.1 is working perfectly fine. You can try with this thing. So the stiffness is like how much stiff your hair will be. Like if you apply a wind force, like I will show you later, if you applied a wind force and you want your hair to be affected by the wind, then you need to make sure the stiffness is not too much, or else it will not affect it properly. Or what you need to, or what you have to do, you have to just increase the wind force, then only it will simulate, not simulate, like it will move properly. So I will recommend you to use 0.10, something like this, it will be fine. Then there is an option called random do not change, damping do not change. So then you will get some kind of cache. So this one is for the baking stuff, you no need to change anything for this thing. Then you have to go to render. So it will be on, ticked on. Okay, show emitter. So the show emitter is the emitter where you, from where you emit the hair particles. So it was that. So then there in the render tab you have like path, timing, extra. You just need to go to click on path, enable B-spline, steps increase to 6 to 5 or 10, maximum 10, don't go beyond that. So it's basically depends, like if your hair is longer then you need more steps. Okay, if your hair is shorter then you need less. Okay, so the more you increase, the laggier your blender will be, because it's gonna cause serious lag issue. Like you couldn't able to see these things in real time. Okay, if you make this 5, 6 and something like this. So I will recommend you to just play around those things and see what's work for your PC well. So then we have called viewport display. And in viewport display you can make this thing also 7, because it will show, this is for the render. Okay, and this one is for viewport. So if you want to make your viewport a little bit smoother like that, then you can decrease this number to 2 or 1, something like that, and increase this thing in 10. So in render it will be properly bending, properly doing its simulation, and in this one it will be just degrade the quality of the simulation and try to simulate this thing in real time. Okay, so that's the use of this one. And you can just click on the show emitter, it will be just disable and enable. You can see it's my emitter, you can this thing, and if I disable this it will gone. Okay, so you can turn this thing off. Then there is an option called children. Okay, so if I click on none, then you can see I'm only simulating this much of particle. Okay, if you see it's very less, like I'm using, like if I go up, then you can see I'm using 500 particles. Default it was 1000, but I use 500 because 1000 is too much. Then what I do, I go to children and try to interpolate that thing, and I try to create more hairs so it looks nice like that. So there is some options. You can display amount, like display how much amount of hair you want to display in your viewport. I will recommend you to decrease this to 10, or it will be laggier so much and you couldn't able to work properly. So now you can see it is playing much smoother in the viewport, so you can just do the things in real time. It will be helpful. But in render amount you can increase it to 100. It will be rendering the whole amount of 100 amount of, like in this much amount of hair in the final render. Okay, but if I try to play back this thing, it will be much laggier and I couldn't able to play it properly. Okay, so I will decrease it to 10. And then you don't need to change anything. There is some settings called parting clump. You don't need to change parting. Clumping is used to change the shape of the hair. So if I decrease my clumping, so default it was 0, like see, so it was like clump is my 0. So the tip of the hair is separated. If I increase it like that, the tip is like come together and form this type of shape. So it looks like anime and it looks cool. Like see, the hairs looks so sharp and looking good. So if I decrease it, See, it doesn't look that much good. Okay, so I will recommend you to, it depends on you how you want your hair. So I'm using one value. Then you don't need to change anything, these things, nothing, hair shape, nothing. There is an option called field weight. So if you want some kind of force, like I'm using forces, so if you can see that I'm using some kind of force, this one is, so this one is, I'm using a turbulence, I'm using a wind force, I'm using another wind, I'm using another wind. Okay, so the more you will use, it totally depends on you. The more you use, the better it gonna create the simulation, the better it the more it will create the complexity of the hair, and the more it look realistic. So that's the thing. If you want, if you are using just one wind option, like if I just disable everything and if I just use one this thing, then it's not gonna create that much amount of complexity in this hair. Like, see the complexity in the real life, how the real hair works. So it not gonna create that much complexity. Okay, so I will recommend you to use turbulence, wind force, whatever you have, you can use it. And that's the thing. And what you need to do, you have to make sure that you put all your forces in one collection, and then when you open your field weights, then you have to just select your collection and the all forces are applied to this one. If you didn't do this thing, then it will not work, your force will not apply to your hair. So this is the important thing. And then you don't need to change anything, you can add a force field settings, this like that. You will see something like it, but it is not recommended. You can leave this thing like that. So the outer forces are good enough for this simulation. And then I will show you some simulation settings. So for the wind, when you add the wind, what you have to do, make sure you try with different settings, how much strength you need, how much flow you want, all stuff like that. And make sure that if you want to variation in your hairs, like intersecting with each other like that, then make sure that you increase your noise amount, because it will create some wind noise. Because in real life, wind is not linear, it will very noisy, something like that. So it will create some realistic looking hair simulation. And you can just turn this thing off. Do not take this absorption, it will just bump up your render time, and it is not recommended. Okay, do not turn these things off. Okay, I mean on, or it will just increase your render time. It is not good for your simulation, and it doesn't do that much also. Okay, so, and the main other thing is that just by wind you can't create the complexity. Like if I go up and down, you see there is a waves of the things, like they are moving, like intersecting, crossing with each other, the hairs looking like this. It looks so good now. So how you can create this type of look? Okay, so you need to use turbulence. So I'm using a turbulence, and you can see I'm using a turbulence, and it was placed just side of the hair or in the center of your head, wherever you want to just place the turbulence you can place. And then I'm just tracking the, add the keyframe and try to track the head position, so that it just lined up with the head, and it's doing its work. Like it creates some kind of noise in the hair, so it looks more realistic. And then the settings of the turbulence will be like, if you do not make sure that your wind strength is matching with your turbulence, like my wind strength is 50 and my turbulence strength is 50 also. So try to match this thing, or you can just experiment with this type of things. And the main thing is the size. Okay, so the size is the main thing. So if you want your hair to be just moving like very precisely, like small intersection, if you want that thing now, you need to use like 0.001, 0.002, like stuff like that thing. Okay, do not go beyond that 0.1. Okay, so the 0.1 will create the larger waves of the turbulence, and the smaller you go, the smaller the waves become, and the complex the hair simulation will look like. So I recommend you to use the smaller value, like 0.001, 0.002, something like this. Okay, so it will create the small turbulence, like very noisy turbulence stuff, and it will create the complexity like this. Okay, it will just not go like a straight line, something like that. Okay, it will just create the complexity of the hair, like you can see there. it will just create the complexity. So use the lower value as much you can. So this one is the main thing, okay, if you want to create something very complex in the hair simulation, this is very important. Then you can increase the noise amount. I will recommend you to increase the noise amount to 10 in every wind force, whatever you are using, it doesn't matter, just increase it to 10, okay. It will help you to make your hair look realistic, good, and whatever. Okay, it will look good. So just try to make this thing 10 and hopefully it will work perfectly fine. And if you're seeing that still your hair is not properly simulating or it is intersecting with your mesh, so what you do, you just click on your mesh that you are doing the hair like this. I'm separating this thing, so you have to just click I separate this thing and you have to just click this thing, and then you have to right click and just convert this thing to not convert, like set the origin to geometry, okay. So sometimes the origin is not proper, then that's why it was not simulating properly, I think so. But you just make sure that you do that things, all these things, and hopefully you will get a better simulation in your hair. So that's it. Thank you for watching.